Wow, can you believe she's not doing anything even though she's about to have her baby? What kind of parent does that make her? When I opened the front door, I saw my daughter Jessica and her husband Thomas. Thomas looked unhappy and started complaining about the dusty floor and dirty bathroom. He seemed to think that because Jessica wasn't cleaning, it was my fault as her parent. I tried to explain that Jessica's pregnant belly made it hard for her to clean, but Thomas didn't listen. Instead, he said he was leaving Jessica because she couldn't keep the house clean. My name is Rebecca, and I'm 54 years old. I work for a big company, and it's just been me and Jessica since her dad passed away. Raising Jessica by myself was tough, but her happiness always made it worth it. Jessica is a kind and caring person with good friends, but she struggled to find a boyfriend. I hoped she'd meet someone in high school or college, but she didn't. Eventually, she started dating a guy she met through a friend, and they got engaged after a couple of years. I was happy for her, even though it meant she'd move out soon. Jessica's husband, Thomas, is older than her and really focused on his career. He often stays late at work or goes out, leaving Jessica to do all the chores. I thought they should share the chores, but I didn't want to interfere too much in their lives. Then, about 6 months after their wedding, Jessica invited me to lunch to tell me she's pregnant. Jessica always loved children, even though she didn't have any siblings herself. She used to talk about wanting a little brother or sister. But since I didn't plan to remarry, I couldn't give her that. Despite being married, Jessica still wanted kids, and she spoke to her belly with love, showing how excited she was to become a mom. Seeing her like this made me really happy. As we said goodbye after lunch, I reminded Jessica that I'm here for her if she needs anything. During Jessica's pregnancy, she kept working, so I made sure to check on her often. But when I got a big work project that meant I'd be traveling a lot, I worried about leaving her. Jessica reassured me she'd be fine, so I threw myself into my work. By the time Jessica was close to giving birth, my project was almost done, and things were calming down at work. I called Jessica to talk about plans for when the baby arrived, but Thomas answered the phone instead. He said Jessica was being useless and that he was bringing her over to my place. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Opening the door, I found Jessica looking really messy next to Thomas when I opened the door. She seemed different, not even able to muster a smile. Her eyes had dark circles under them, and her hair, nails, and skin looked dry. She didn't look like a woman in her 20s at all. Her hands were cracked and bleeding, and she seemed distant, staring off into space. How could she have changed so much in just a few months? I let them inside and had them sit down. Since Jessica couldn't speak, I asked Thomas what was going on. "Thomas, why is Jessica like this?" I demanded. He seemed surprised and didn't show any shame as he replied, "Are you blaming me? She's the one who slowed down because of her big belly. You know, housework is a woman's job, and she even faked being sick to get out of it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You made a pregnant Jessica do all the chores, even when she was feeling sick. Pregnancy isn't an illness, you know. She even asked me for help with the chores while I've been working all day. Anyway, she's struggling and not able to do her chores. So please take care of her until she gives birth." That's when I realized this man had no clue about pregnancy or being a good father. I couldn't trust him to take care of my daughter. "Okay, I'll take care of her. I can't rely on you to look after her properly." When I told Thomas, he snapped back, "Well, if your daughter's a mess, it's because you didn't raise her right. She doesn't even know how to treat her husband without a father figure. I'm the one suffering here. Once the baby's born, come get it. And in the meantime, teach your daughter how to behave, Rebecca." Before he left, he told me to fix my daughter's upbringing before the baby arrived. Then he just walked away, leaving Jessica behind. I couldn't believe his nerve. I regretted letting Jessica marry him deeply. She just sat there, looking so lost. First things first, I needed to make her feel safe. So I went to the kitchen, poured some milk into her favorite cup with a bit of sugar, and warmed it up. "Be careful, it's hot," I warned her as I handed it over. As Jessica sipped the warm milk, she couldn't hold back her tears. They streamed down her face as she sobbed. I sat beside her, comforting her with a gentle rub on her back, ready to listen to whatever she needed to say. Jessica opened up about Thomas. Despite her pregnancy, he continued going to work parties and leaving her alone when she needed him. He wouldn't lift a finger to help around the house and even demanded she do chores when she was feeling sick from being pregnant. "Hey, get up. "You've been lounging around. You haven't done the dishes or laundry," he'd say. Sometimes, he'd come home after drinking with colleagues and make her cook and clean for them. I felt my anger rising, hearing how my pregnant daughter was being treated like a servant. Jessica explained that she didn't want to risk my career, so she put up with it. She even asked doctors to explain to Thomas about the changes her body was going through, but he wouldn't listen. Her own family lived too far away to help, and she'd always put others before herself. I hugged Jessica tightly and whispered, "From now on, it's okay to put yourself first, Jessica. If you need help, don't hesitate to ask. I'm sorry I didn't realize sooner." I gently stroked her head, and she whispered back, "Mom, thank you," before breaking down into childlike sobs. In the days that followed, Jessica's emotional state seemed to worsen as her due date neared. When I came home from work, I found the house spotless. Despite my insistence that she rest, Jessica kept doing chores. She'd even try to move heavy things or fix broken light bulbs. Sometimes she'd pack her bags, scared of facing her husband's anger. I thought she might need professional help, so I reached out to our neighbor, Lisa, who used to be a therapist, and asked for a recommendation for a counseling clinic. "Lisa, hi, do you have a moment? I need to talk about my daughter," I said as she welcomed me into her home. I shared Jessica's situation with her and her husband, Kevin, and they recommended a good clinic. Jessica had been feeling unwell, so she started going to the hospital. Lisa and Kevin were worried about her, so when I was at work, Lisa would check in on her. Thankfully, Jessica started to feel better and smile more like she used to. When Jessica's due date arrived, I took her to the hospital as her contractions started. I stayed by her side, rubbing her back and wiping her sweat, cheering her on. When it was time for her to go into the delivery room, I waited anxiously until I heard the baby cry. A nurse told me that both Jessica and the baby were healthy, which was a huge relief. When I went to see them, Jessica was holding our sleeping baby in her arms. Despite my anger towards Thomas, I still let him know that our baby girl was born healthy. When he entered the hospital room and saw the baby, he made hurtful comments. "Yuck. Babies look like monkeys, not cute at all. Jessica, you're not even wearing makeup and just lying in bed. You're so lazy. Put some effort into how you look. You're a woman." The nurses and doctors who heard him were furious. They surrounded Thomas, yelling at him for not being supportive. But Thomas just got more irritated and snapped back, "Shut up. My mom was working even right after giving birth. This is clearly laziness. I've never heard of a woman going back to work right after having a baby, and it's unlikely Thomas's mom did that. Something must have twisted his memory. He's never shown any interest in pregnancy or childbirth, so it's no surprise he doesn't understand." Thomas stormed out and didn't even bother showing up on Jessica's discharge day. There were no signs of him coming to pick her up. Concerned about sending Jessica back to Thomas, I offered for her to stay with me, but Jessica insisted on going home, saying it wouldn't be fair for the baby to grow up without a father. Reluctantly, I called Thomas to see if he would come get them. His response was dismissive, saying he was too busy with work and didn't want to deal with a crying baby. Then he hung up. I brought Jessica and the baby home, suggesting she stay with me until she got the hang of parenting. Thomas hadn't bothered to buy any baby supplies, so we went shopping together to make sure they had everything they needed. He hadn't even thought of a name for the baby because work was all he cared about, so Jessica and I chose one together. We named her Sarah. Our neighbors, Lisa and her husband, knew about the situation and helped out with looking after Sarah. With their support, Sarah grew up well. About 3 months after Sarah's birth, Thomas suddenly showed up unannounced to take Jessica and Sarah back. "Hey, I'm here to pick you up. Hurry up, you're always so slow," Thomas yelled from the front door. But Jessica had reached a point where she fully understood how terrible Thomas was and had decided to divorce him. She refused to be controlled by him anymore. "I'm not coming back home. I'll send you the divorce papers," she replied firmly from behind the door. Thomas couldn't believe it. "Are you kidding me? In today's world, a man with a wife and kids is more likely to succeed. What's the point of being married to you if we divorce?" "I'm never getting divorced," he yelled back. My daughter was furious, realizing that Thomas had only married her and had a child for the sake of his career. Before I could say anything, our neighbors, Lisa and her husband Kevin, came out of their house. Thomas went pale when he saw Kevin, who turned out to be his boss. "Boss, what are you doing here?" Thomas stammered as Lisa and Kevin approached. Kevin, clearly disappointed, said, "So, you're Jessica's husband. It's unbelievable that someone like you, who neglected his child for 3 months, turns out to be you. You lack empathy, and I can't trust my team with someone like you. I'll inform the CEO, and your promotion is canceled." Thomas pleaded with Kevin, but Kevin was unmoved. "You don't even want to listen. You only ever cared about your work." Thomas cried, clinging to Kevin in desperation. Kevin didn't allow Thomas to say anything more. Thomas, feeling defeated, dropped to his knees. Kevin, known as a family man both in the neighborhood and at work, couldn't stand to see Thomas treating his family so poorly. It turned out that Thomas had been pretending to be a good husband and father at work to boost his chances of promotion. Quietly, Thomas went home that day, but at the office, he started pestering his colleagues and subordinates, asking them to put in a good word for him with the boss for a promotion. When no one complied, he went straight to the CEO. "Sir, I've worked hard for this company every day. My sales numbers are consistently high. Please approve my promotion," he pleaded with the CEO. But the CEO had already heard from Kevin. "Your performance numbers might look good, but you've been using aggressive tactics to win contracts," the CEO said. "Just raising your own numbers isn't enough. A deal that tarnishes the company's image is a failure, even if it's successful. If you can't understand that, you won't move up. I have no more expectations for you." Thomas left the CEO's office looking defeated. The CEO, who occasionally appears on TV and is known for his integrity, made his decision based on more than just reports from Thomas's boss. It was a clear message to Thomas. He lost his motivation for work, started making more mistakes, and was eventually transferred to a regional department with very little work. At least he didn't lose his job entirely. After his transfer, Thomas kept coming to our house, begging for another chance and wanting to see Sarah. Both Jessica and I ignored him, but when he became too persistent, Kevin warned him that he would report him to the CEO, which could get him fired. After that, Thomas stopped bothering us. It became clear that his affection was shallow. When Kevin found out that Jessica was struggling to get her divorce approved, he referred her to a top-notch attorney. The divorce went through smoothly, and she even received compensation for emotional distress. Meanwhile, Thomas was transferred and seemed to be living a quiet, lonely life in a rural area. I heard this from Kevin. Kevin mentioned that the last time Thomas came into the office, he looked completely different. His shirt and suit were wrinkled, he had grown a beard, and he had lost a lot of weight. In the small town where Thomas moved, it's not easy to get to a dry cleaner or convenience store without a car. Maybe he's trying to save on gas or simply can't be bothered, but if he's not using these services, he'll have to take care of himself. Since Thomas never lifted a finger to help with housework and always said it was a woman's job, he probably doesn't know how to do anything for himself. He must regret treating Jessica like a servant now that he's all alone. Perhaps Thomas feels like he's lost everything since the divorce and losing custody. He even started to forget the child support payments he promised to make for Sarah. Whenever Jessica reminds him, he apparently tells her how tough his life is, almost in tears. I advised Jessica to inform her lawyer, and as soon as she requested child support through legal channels, it got paid. So far, we haven't heard anything from Thomas about wanting to see Sarah. If Sarah wants to, we'll reach out. But Jessica and I agreed that we'll pour lots of love into raising her into a fine adult even without a father around.